Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Through the Fire and the SBN Small Business Network podcast. I am your host, Ryan Wickline, and today we have a very special guest. He is a coach, and he is the founder of Inspired Stewardship, Scott Maderer. How you doing today, Scott?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, not a problem. Anytime another John Maxwell guy wants to reach out to me and come on, I was like, oh, man, don't see too many of them around where I'm at, so...
Yeah, it depends on where you're at. There's different people in different places. My wife and I went through the training back in, I think it's 2012, and then she went through it in 2014. So we've kind of been around the John Maxwell group for a long time. It's gone by different names during that time. And then, of course, I was always a student of John Maxwell long before I ever attended any of the trainings and things. In fact, there's a John Maxwell book on the shelf right behind me.
Awesome. Like I said, yeah, he's one of the aforementioned guys you want to go to if you want to learn about leadership.
Yep. Yeah, he's been doing it a long time and has a lot of material out there. And he's definitely a virtual mentor. When I was in the corporate world, and even when I was a school teacher, it was somebody that I learned a lot from consuming his books and studying the way he did things and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So the number one question the audience probably wondering, who is Scott Maderer?
Well, I was born in a cabin in Kentucky. Oh, no, wait, that's Abraham Lincoln. Sorry. No, I am a coach currently, but I started my life doing a lot of different things. I'm kind of one of those eclectic people. So I started my first business when I was about 12 years old. I did that for a while. My dad was a small business owner. I worked with him. And so I've kind of always had that entrepreneurial bug. That was the culture I grew up in. At the same time, I was growing up in a house where my dad was a small business owner. He's also an alcoholic and had a lot of issues there that, I learned and grew through. I decided I wanted to go into medical research, went to college to do that. Started doing research for a little while, figured out, this is really more about chasing grant money than it is about actually helping people. Don't really want to chase grant money the rest of my life. So I went into teaching and became a school teacher. Did that for 16 years. I've taught pretty much every science that the state of Texas offers. In all of that period, I got married, I got divorced, and I married my current wife. And she and I have been together now 28 years. Got married, still teaching. As anyone who's taught before knows, there's a lot of rewarding things about it. I loved engaging with the kids. I loved working with them, not just on the content and the teaching and the stuff and the quiz at the end of the book and all of that junk, but just engaging with them about life and about learning and about figuring out who they were and what do they want to be when they grew up and that kind of thing. Eventually, I burned out on teaching. I left. I went into the corporate world. I started working for an educational testing company. So I went from teaching students to writing tests. In the words of my students, I joined the dark side. But I didn't really. Testing is still about helping students in different ways. It's not a perfect system, but there's great things about it. And there's bad things about it, just like anything else. Worked myself up in the corporate world, spent 11 years there, worked up into a senior position, kind of a dream job that everyone looked at me and said, this is great and all the good things and big salary and good benefits and all of those things. But in the same time that was going on, that transition from teaching to the corporate world, my wife and I went through a lot of financial challenges. We actually had a period of time where we weren't communicating because of money and debt and things that were going on. I was actually suicidal because of finances. We were probably headed towards a divorce. In that time, we kind of turned around and came together and decided, nope, we're going to do things differently. We started doing things radically differently, began to pay off debt, began to kind of reshape how we lived and what we did and how we prioritized things in our life. And as we were doing that, people would start coming over and be like, okay, y'all are weird. Can you help us be weird? And so I started working with folks in kind of a coaching relationship on the side at the same time that I'm kind of climbing the corporate ladder. And then I realized that this work that I was doing as a coach was so much more in alignment with my gifts and my passions and the things that I really love to do, that I actually reversed my climb up the corporate ladder, kind of climbed back down from a senior position, eventually left and took the coaching business full time. That's sort of how Inspired Stewardship was born. And then out of that, since then, I've worked with clients in over 20 countries, 38 states, all over the world, helping small business owners figure out how to master their time, their talent, and their treasures so that they can really live out what they're put on the planet to do.
Wow. Like, that's crazy that you guys just recognized, you were going through all that turmoil, but you recognized, hey, you guys came together and like, hey, we have to make these changes.
Yeah. It was literally a moment of, okay, we're either going to change what we're doing or we're getting divorced and going our separate ways because this isn't working anymore. And luckily, I have a wife who's a very smart, very gifted, very supportive, very kind lady. And she forgave me for a lot of things that I was doing wrong. And, I acknowledged those things. I also had a lot going on internally about, as men, a lot of us want to be really good providers. I felt like I was a terrible provider. I felt like she'd be better off with the insurance money. She didn't really need me. She needed the money. By the way, she will assure you that that's not true. She actually wanted me. But, at the time, that's kind of what's going on in your head. And so all of these dark thoughts, which of course made the situation worse, not better. But for me, it was kind of a God thing. God put some messages in my path that began to give me the frame that maybe there was hope. Maybe there was something different that I could do. Again, that's kind of what I like to do now as a coach, is sometimes work with somebody that's like, okay, this is hopeless, and give them hope that, you know what, it's not hopeless. There's actions you can take. There's processes you could do. There's tools that you can avail yourself of. There's decisions you can make. And no matter where you are, there's things that can be different. And really and truly, if they're different in a better way, that's really all hope is.
Yeah. So what kind of services do you provide?
So I mainly do one-on-one coaching. That's the bulk of what I do. And usually people come to me with either time or money issues. So they either are thinking, I don't have enough time to do what I'm supposed to do, I'm called to do, or I don't have enough money to do what I'm called to do. I will tell you, those are actually the symptoms, not the problem, but people usually think they're the problem. So that's where they come to help. And then what I really work with people on is what I call talent, because it's not really about time and money. It's about how you relate to, approach, prioritize, use. It's how you manage you when it comes to your time or your money. I also go in and do workshops and speaking events. I've written a book and I do speaking on that. The book is called Inspired Living. It kind of takes the same framework and lays it out for people that are kind of more DIY and don't necessarily want to work with a full-time coach, but want to learn more about this topic and the approach and the frameworks that we use. And then I also go in and do financial wellness for companies and employees, especially for small business owners who are like, hey, this is something my employees struggle with. And a lot of times it's affecting the business and they need someone to come in and do different things. I've done everything from one-on-one coaching with employees to coming in and doing a workshop series to doing group coaching programs. There's 1,000 different ways we can solve the problem. But the truth is, I come in and design what it is that employer needs to basically serve their employees the best way possible.
Nice. So you'd say probably the biggest challenges your clients face is probably time and money.
That's what they think the biggest challenge is. Yeah.
But what probably is their biggest challenge then in your mind?
It's really their mindset around time and money. So time and money are just resources. They're finite resources. You have a certain amount of money, you have a certain amount of time. Now, time is even more fixed as a resource because you got 24 hours in a day, and so does everybody else. Where money, yeah, you may make $60,000 a year, and maybe somebody else makes $600,000 a year. But here's what's interesting with both of them. It's not about how much you make. It's not about how much you have. It's about how do you prioritize that? How do you use that? How do you spend those resources? And are you doing it in a way with what's actually aligned with what you want to accomplish and achieve and what you need to do? It's the difference for time between being busy and being productive. With money, it's the difference between spending the money on the things that you want to say yes to and then saying no to other stuff, or is it I'm just spending money and at the end of the day I've run out of money, I still don't have what was really the most important to me, so now I'm going to spend more money, in other words go into debt, to get those things that are really important to me, when the reality is you may have had enough money to do it all along, but you were prioritizing it wrong. So I've worked with people that make $600,000 a year that are living paycheck to paycheck. I've worked with folks that are making, $37,000 a year living paycheck to paycheck. It's not the income, it's the attitude that matters. And so the truth is the problem, the core problem isn't the time or the money, it's you. Good news is you're also the solution, but a lot of times your mindset, your beliefs, your prioritization, the techniques that you're using, those sorts of things are the core problem.
I love it. Talking about mindset and like telling them pretty much, hey, you're your biggest problem, but you're also the biggest
You're
solution.
also the biggest solution.
You
Exactly.
just have to take accountability.
Yeah. Usually it's lack of awareness. A lot of times it's hard to fix a problem when you don't know there's a problem.
Yeah.
Until you're aware of what's happening, you can't make different decisions. And that's not because people are stupid. It's not because they're ignorant. It's not lack of information even, because, let's face it, like doing a budget, you can Google how to put together a budget. I mean, it's a simple concept. It's, how much do I make? What do I spend it on? How much is left at the end? I mean, that's a budget. This is not complicated. Time, the same thing. You get up in the morning, you've got things on your to-do list or things that you need to get done. But then you get to the end of the day and you're like, I'm busy all day long, but I haven't done a single thing that was on my list that was important. How did that happen? Same thing happens with money. It's like, the money comes in, the money goes out, only the names are changed and you don't even know what happened. That's the problem. And the real thing there isn't the thing, it's your awareness and your relationship with the thing, because until you pay attention to it, you're going to keep getting what you've been getting, because you're going to keep doing what you've been doing. It's habits, it's behavior, it's mindset, it's beliefs. Sometimes those come from past things. They come from the habits that you built up over years. Sometimes it just comes from not being organized. It can come from 1,000 different things. But the end result is you're not going to make a change because you don't even know there's a problem to fix.
Yeah. How can people identify their calling, and why do most people get this wrong?
So let's start first off with defining it. I lean into calling a lot. And what happens most of the time is people hear calling and they immediately think about, what do I do for a living? I even kind of alluded to that a little earlier when I said this coaching stuff is more aligned with the way I'm designed, the way I'm built. But here's the thing. There's two words that we use in the English language, and we use them interchangeably, but they actually mean two different things. Okay. The first word is career. The second word is vocation. So let me define those for a minute. A career, the root word for career actually comes from the same root as cart. A career is like a cart. Well, what's a cart? A cart is something that's designed to move you from point A to point B. It's a mode of transportation. So your career is something that's designed to get you from one point to another. It's the functional thing. Usually it's the thing that pays you money, and then you use that money to do other things. So it's functional, if that makes sense. The word vocation, the root word is actually vocalis. It's the same root that we get vocal, vocalization. It is the same root because it literally means to be called. What that means, first off, is there has to be a caller and a callee. So for me, I identify the caller as God. I don't care what language you put on it. I don't care what name you give it, universe, the way you're built, the way you're designed, whatever it amounts to is there's things about you that mean that there are things that when you do them, when you're engaged with them, when you participate in them, they give you energy. And then there are other things that you do that drain energy from you. And that's true for all of us. What I'm talking about with the calling or the vocation then is that's that thread that runs through all the components of your life, not just your career, what you do for a living, but it shows up in how you're a dad. It shows up in how you're a mom. It shows up in how you're a spouse. It shows up in how you do volunteer work. It shows up in what you do with your spare time. It shows up in everything you do. It's that thread of purpose or passion or design or structure or giftings, or again, I can keep giving different words because different words resonate with different people. It's that thing that when you do it, you're like, man, this clicks. Or when you do something that lets you associate with it, you're like, man, this clicks. A lot of times though, we're blind to it because it is the thing that clicks. What happens is a lot of times you have things that you're gifted at, that you're able to do, that feed you, that give you energy. And it almost becomes so routine that when somebody else comes along and goes, dude, Ryan, man, it is so awesome when you fill in the blank. And you usually end up going, oh yeah, it's nothing special. Anyone can do it. No, they can't. That's why everyone else is impressed. That's what everyone else is like, dude, you come alive when you do this. And you're like, whatever.
Yeah.
And, we're blind to it because it becomes and feeds into us. And so what's interesting is when you step back and look at it, that's when you're getting more in alignment with your calling. And it might mean, and I'll give you 2 exercises in a second for those people that are hearing all of this and going, great, but how do I figure out what that thread is? I'll give you an exercise for that. But at the end of the day, once you start finding that thread, it may mean changing your career, but it also may not. It may instead be, okay, wait, these are the parts of my job and my career that I lean into. Because there's always going to be parts of your day that don't align with your calling. I mean, guess what? Your laundry still has to be washed, whether you want to or not. But what you can do is find a way to wash your laundry that still is in alignment with kind of your underlying wiring. And all of a sudden washing laundry becomes more fun, So it's not that it goes away. It's that you're focusing on the parts of it that give you energy. So how do we identify it? I'm going to give you a 2-part exercise. One of them is looking backwards. The other one's looking forward. And I'll give you a resource later, right at the end of the show, that if folks want to download this because they're hearing it, they're driving right now, maybe you're not able to really listen and engage, I'll give it to you in writing so you can actually get it later. So the first exercise is looking backwards. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to take a sheet of paper. We're going to divide it into 3 columns, left hand, middle, right hand column. Down the left hand column, just start brainstorming everything you've done in your life up to this point. And I really do mean when I say everything you've done in your life, I don't just mean everything you've gotten paid to do in your life. Relationships you've had. I had that one girlfriend in high school. Her name was Rachel, whatever. Start brainstorming things that you've done, relationships you've been in, activities you've participated in, volunteer stuff you've done, things you've gotten paid to do. All of those different components of your life, spiritual things that you've done, things around your finances, things around your friendships, whatever it is, be as broad as you can. This is stream of consciousness time, not filter time. Just write it down. If it crosses your brain, write it down. Fill that left-hand column. In fact, fill more than one left-hand column. This is one of those things, if you want to spend a week on it and you want to end up with 13 pages, wonderful. More is good, not bad. Because you're wanting to try to cast as broad a net as you can of things that you've got feelings about what you did. Because in that second 2 columns, we're going to do this. We're going to go back to the activity. And in the middle column, we're going to write down what was it about that behavior, that activity, that engagement that gave me energy, that brought me joy. What are the things that I loved about doing that? What was it the things that showed up for me and fed my soul? And then in the last column, write down things that you didn't love about that activity. What were the things that took energy from you? What were the things that didn't feed your soul? What were the things that drained you? So at the end of the day, you should end up with this long list of activities. And for every activity, you should have 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 or 12 things that you enjoyed, that gave you energy, that fed your soul, and 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 12 things that you didn't love. And then go back and start looking for patterns. What keeps showing up? Maybe you use different words. Maybe you described it differently, but things will keep showing up in the love column and things will keep showing up in the don't love column. And sometimes just even the amount of stuff that's in there will tell you something. It's like, well, on this one, I had 1 thing in the love column and I had 13 things in the don't love column. Okay, what does that tell you? Because you're looking for patterns of what gives you energy, what feeds into who you are. Because out of those patterns will begin to give you some insights into how you're wired, how you're designed, what it is that feeds you. Those are things that are in alignment with your calling. However, the problem with this is you can only put down things that you've actually already done or experienced, right? Well, and no matter how long you've lived, no matter how experienced you are, that's going to be a limited set of data. So the second activity that we're going to do is a looking forward activity. And yes, you can do these at exactly the same time and you can do them in either order. So it doesn't matter. So looking forward is kind of more of a dream activity. So imagine for a minute, Ryan, it's 5 years from today. Okay. 5 years from today. This is 5 years in the future. And you've been on a trip and you've flown across the country and you've done your business at this location and you're flying home. And you know how a lot of times when you fly home, you end up in an airport, you know, you got to change planes and then you're going to fly the rest of the way home. So you end up in that airport in between. So you land there in that airport in between, you're kind of stuck in the middle of nowhere. And as you walk across the airport and you get to the gate that you're about to board, you look up and it's got those dreaded words above the sign, flight delayed.
Yep.
Great. Yay. You go up to the person at working the desk. You're like, how long is the flight delayed? They go, well, unfortunately, 4 hours. Yay. I've now got 4 hours stuck in this airport with nothing to do. So you do what anyone does when they're stuck in an airport for 4 hours, depending on your particular poison. You either go find a bar or a restaurant to go hang out in and get something to eat or something to drink. So I'm going to pick a restaurant. Again, child of an alcoholic. Don't do the bar thing, but I go over to the restaurant. And as I'm walking in, I happen to look up and a friend of mine who I haven't seen for 5 years is sitting in the restaurant, and they see me, I see them, they pop up. They're like, hey, how you doing? I haven't seen you for 5 years. It's so awesome to run into you. Maybe you just drifted apart. You moved away. You haven't talked that much. You talked a few times, but you haven't really kept up. They're like, are you here long? And you're like, well, I wasn't going to be, but now I got a 4-hour layover. They're like, hey, I'm here for a couple hours too. Let's go grab a corner booth and catch up. I'm like, awesome. So you go grab a quiet booth. I know that's an impossibility, but just dream with me. You go grab a quiet booth in the corner of the restaurant in the airport, and your friend looks at you and says, you know, Ryan, it's so great to see you. How have the last 5 years been treating you? And you look at your friend dead in the eye across the table and you go, you know what? This has been the best 5 years of my life because. Your job's to tell me what comes after the word because. What is it about your career? What is it about your family? What is it about your relationships? What is it about your spiritual life? What is it about your finances? What is it about your time? What is it about all of the different parts of your life that would make you sincerely tell somebody this next 5 years have been the best 5 years ever? Concentrate on the emotions too. It's not about, don't put down, you know, oh, I won the lottery and won $40 million. Because guess what? Winning $40 million won't change your life. If you keep living, you know, let's say you have a problem with overspending and I give you $40 million, you'll just overspend with more zeros unless you change the fundamental mindset and belief that you have. That's why, by the way, 60% of lottery winners, something like that, go bankrupt, you know, after winning the lottery. And people are like, how does that happen? It's because they didn't change their mindset, their behavior. We gave them more money. They just kept doing the same thing. It's about, what is it about your, you know, what would make you feel better about your career? Maybe it is changing jobs, but why? What is it about changing jobs? Because guess what? If you got a problem with your job and you change jobs, a lot of times you take the problem with you. Okay. Because it's you and the way you're looking at the job that's the problem, not the job, if that makes sense. What is it about your relationships? What is it about your finances? Lean in and dream and talk about how it would feel to legitimately say these next 5 years have been the best 5 years of my life. Because here's the point. These two activities together, that 5-year one gives you a destination. It lets you start thinking about where do you want to go. By the way, it doesn't mean that's where you're going to end up, because you're going to discover things along the way that may make you shift and change. And it's the best dream that we have today, but that dream may get different and it may get better and it may shift. It's okay that it changes. And then the past looking activity, those are the building blocks. Those are the things that you've already experienced that let you build from those things towards that future picture. Between the two things, what will bubble up from that is some ideas about what you're designed to do, what you're built to do, what I would call your underlying passions, your calling, and how that can show up in your life.
Huh. That's kind of an interesting take on everything. So how would one person transition from a job they hate to the calling they love?
You know, the trick is to recognize that it's a process, not an event. Again, just like I just gave you that past looking activity, that future looking activity, and I set the future 5 years in the future. Why did I do that? Because it's going to be a journey of destination of discovery. It's not going to be a one size fits all flip a switch. A lot of times what we're looking for is the easy button. We're looking for that, you know, slap the button and go, everything's fixed. Doesn't happen that way. It's gradual work over a long period of time. It's small incremental change done consistently that changes your life. Think about it. Let's use physical fitness as an example. Have you ever been to a gym in January? You can't get on a machine.
Yeah.
The place is packed, right? Everyone's joined the gym. Yeah, go back on March 1st. What does it look like? Ain't no problem getting on the machine because there's nobody in there. There's the owner and like 3 people, right? And they're the gym rats. They're the people that are going to be there no matter what. They hate January, by the way. The people that actually, the gym rats, they hate January. They're like, oh, I can't wait till February 14th when all these people clear out, because it doesn't last. Because what they were looking for when they joined the gym in January is a quick fix. They were looking for that light switch. This is going to change my life. And the reality is it doesn't. But that guy or that gal that shows up to the gym and 30 minutes, or sometimes it's not even showing up for the gym, it's just going for a walk for 30 minutes. But they make a commitment. I'm going to do this every single day. They may get an accountability partner. They may get a coach. They may get a physical trainer. They inject accountability in some way, shape, or form, and they make a small change, but then they stick to it. And what's funny is that small change, that 30-minute walk, pretty soon it turns into an hour, or it turns into a run, or it spills over and they're like, you know what? I'm going to eat different, just because. It's funny. I'll work with people on budgeting and money, and they'll come back after 6 months and they're like, I'm losing weight. Why am I losing weight? It's not like I'm not eating. What's going on? And it's just the habit of paying attention to their life in one area starts to spill over to another area. And all of a sudden they're eating differently, and they're like, oh, I didn't set out to lose weight. That wasn't my goal, but it happened anyway, because discipline in one area compounds into discipline in other areas. So it's recognizing that those small, incremental, consistent changes are actually the path to change and success. Once you realize that, well, that's true of your calling too. It means stop looking for the one light switch and start thinking about what's the small next action I can take today. And then what's the small next action I can take the next day? And what's the small next action I can take the next day? And what you'll discover is you'll look up in a year and you'll have made tremendous progress on moving in that direction. Now, practically, what does that look like? A million different things, because it depends on the situation you're in. That may mean you need to save up a big fund of money because you're going to go start your own business and you're probably not going to get paid for a year. And you got to be able to pay the light bill. Okay, that's one set of practical actions. It may mean getting a new certificate or a new skill or a new whatever. There's practical actions you have to take. But I think of those practical actions like tools in a toolbox, and those are very specific to your specific situation. What I just told you about incremental change, that's a framework. And frameworks apply no matter what situation you're in. The practical actions you take may be different, but the process is going to be the same, or the framework is going to be the same.
Nice. So what you're pretty much telling everybody is their daily habits are holding them to whether they're going to achieve their goals or not.
Absolutely. Your habits are who you are in a very real way. And what you achieve and your success is determined in a very, very real way. And by the way, this isn't just Scott saying this. This is research says that. Yeah. I mean, there is millions of data points out there that show you that those consistent actions that you take, your habits determine, your mindset determines your habits determine your actions determine what happens, and it also determines your character. It's even how you look at the world. Do you have a victim mindset or do you have an active mindset? Do you have a growth mindset or a scarcity mindset? These things, and that's the other part. It's a feedback loop. So people ask all the time, if I want to be a writer, should I just start writing or should I believe I'm a writer? And the answer is yes, because both of those, you have to do both. So where do you start? With one of them, which comes first, belief or action? Yes, because it's a loop, it's a circle, it's not a straight line. It's not like I believe and then I act and then I do something else. It's I believe, which makes me act, which makes me believe more, which makes me act more, which makes me believe more. It's a reinforcing thing. We all have those habits that have reinforcement for us. And you have to examine them and think about, is this good reinforcement? Is this reinforcing behaviors and attitudes and actions that I want? Or is it reinforcing actions and behaviors and attitudes that I don't want? One of those, make it smoother, make it easier to do the habit. The other one, create friction, make it harder to do the habit. Okay. And basically, I use that idea of smoothness and friction. If you want to walk in the morning, make it easy to go for a walk in the morning. Lay out your clothes the night before. Oh, but I sleep in and I hit the snooze button and I tend to oversleep. Great. Put the alarm clock on the other side of the room. And right beside the alarm clock is your clothes and your shoes. So by the time you've gotten out of the bed and walked across the bed to turn off the stupid, annoying alarm clock, well, I'm already out of bed. I might as well go ahead and put on the clothes and go for a walk. That's a combination of friction and smoothness, right? I've created friction around staying in bed, and I've created smoothness around putting on my clothes and going for a walk. It's a trite example. It sounds simplistic, but you'd be amazed at that same idea, but applied to other areas of your life, pays off dividends, because at the end of the day, it's the same idea. It's just in different things. If you don't want to, you don't want to spend as much money going out to eat, great. Get cash out and only spend cash when you go out to eat. Why does that work? Guess what, folks? There's a difference when you spend cash than when you use a card. Psychologically, there's a difference. They did a study. They looked at people's brains. When you swipe with a credit card, the pain centers in your brain don't light up. When you hand somebody a $100 bill, the pain centers in your brain light up. You literally feel pain when you spend cash. So just changing to cash changes the way you act. And again, there's a million different tools. I could sit here and spit out examples and specifics, but they work for different people in different situations. The core is to stop back and think, what are the habits I'm behaving? How am I exhibiting them? And are they adding value to my life, or are they taking value away?
Nice. You wrote the book, Inspired Living, Assemble the Puzzle of Your Calling by Mastering Your Time, Your Talent, and Your Treasures. What inspired you to write it?
Well, first off, I didn't write it. I talked it. So I'll give that some context in a minute, but I hate writing. Okay. And I'm not really, my handwriting is atrocious. I type everything anyway. And I really don't like to sit down and type. It's just, I have dysgraphia. My brain doesn't work that way. However, give me a microphone, I love to talk. Okay. I know it's shocking, right? That's one of the reasons I do podcast interviews. I'd rather be talking to somebody than I would write in silence. So I literally took my podcast and took the content from that and turned that into the content for the book. I also, by the way, use the podcast in other ways, because guess what? When you want to write a book, you have to have a publisher. I met my publisher through my podcast. I needed a writing coach. I met my writing coach through my podcast. Somebody has to write the foreword. Guy who wrote the foreword, met through the podcast. Different pieces of the content came from different people that I used in the podcast. So I talked a book into existence. I didn't write it. Why did I do it? Well, two reasons. One, I worked with lots of, like I said, over 1,000 clients, 20 countries, 38 states. I've worked with a ton of people. And over the years of doing that, I started noticing there's certain patterns of habits and behaviors and mindsets around time, talent, and treasures that show up time after time after time. So I wanted to put down frameworks, not processes and not tools, but frameworks that you could use to change those areas of your life in a way that's more aligned. That's what the promise of the book is. I tried to take the approach of not giving you a process, but giving you frameworks, methods of thinking, as opposed to specific examples of what you do. This isn't a do step A, then do step B, then do step C book. It's more of a, here's what you want to look at your life, and then you may want to do different steps depending on what you discover. The rest of that is, I wanted it to be something that folks could reach easily and accessibly. Not everybody has the time, the money, or the inclination to work one-on-one with the coach, but tons of people need to examine these areas of your life. So I wanted something that was more accessible. And then some people are DIY. They'd rather read a book and do it themselves than they would work with somebody or talk to somebody. And so I wanted that out there for those people as well.
Yeah. So what's the biggest challenge you faced while you're writing it?
Writing it.
Or why you're talking it into existence.
Yeah, it is that. It's literally, I've had it on my bucket list forever that, I wanted to write a book someday. I mean, that was something like probably I was 12, 13 years old. And I said that I want to write a book someday. I've always been a voracious reader. I've always been somebody that reads tons of books. And it's like, I want someday to have my name on a book. And yet I had all these barriers in terms of learning and these sorts of things that kept me from doing it. So what did I do? I said, okay, I want to be able to write a book. What's the gradual process that I need to be able to create a book and put it out into life? Exactly what we were just talking about. And it was really stepping back and saying, stop making excuses, stop looking at the barriers. What can I do? What is the action I need to take? So it took me a year and a half from the first commitment to I'm going to actually follow through and create a book to the book hitting the shelves. It was about 18 months. And the challenge throughout that was really just, taking action on the next step. Again, I worked with a coach. I worked with somebody who could kind of go, okay, he's published literally hundreds of books, and I'm like, great, what do I do first? Okay, you need to go do this. Good, I can go do that, and off I'd go and do it. And then he helped me with crafting it and putting it together and making it coherent and those sorts of things because he's done it before. And I'm a big believer in learning on it, learning from and leaning on other people's expertise. I have to be an expert in everything, but I do have to learn from experts when I want to do something. And so, for me, that was hiring a coach. Other people, that may look different ways, but and that's what let me overcome the challenge of just following through and doing it. The biggest problem with writing a book is actually doing it. Lots of people will tell you they want to write a book. Very few people have actually put a book out into the world. And it's that gap between desire and action. That's the biggest challenge for pretty much everybody out there that's done it successfully.
Yeah, I think that was probably the smartest bet too. I'm more of the, hey, tell me what I need to do and I'll go do it. I can do it. Once you tell me what my steps are, because I'll get bogged down with steps and certain processes and different things too.
Yeah, I hired Nick Pavlidis. I freely will tell you that he helped me with writing the book. There's content in there that literally was his creation. I sat down with them and would craft something, and he's like, okay, yeah, but we need to rework that. And here's why, let's go through it together. He did a lot of heavy lifting. The book wouldn't be nearly as good as it is without his help. Because you're right. I mean, it's like, if I had done it all just off my own power, A, I probably never would have finished. And B, if I did finish, it wouldn't be nearly as good as it is. Because that's not my expertise. That's not my gifting. That's not my calling. That's not what I'm supposed to do. But the content that's in it, that's all stuff that is from my calling. So I took the parts that I'm good with, which was telling the stories and putting the pieces together and creating the frameworks, and worked with somebody who was good at the mechanics of, great, now how do I turn that into something that someone can actually read and get value from and remember and apply and take make progress with.
Yeah, I like it. So you host the podcast Inspired Stewardship. Mm-hmm. What's your overall message you give to your audience?
So the worldview of the show is that by becoming better stewards of our time, our talent, and our treasures, we can learn to live out our calling, and then we can do our calling to invest in ourselves, invest in others, develop our influence, and make an impact. Basic idea is everything we've been talking about today. How do you figure out what small actions to take to use your time, your money in a way that's more aligned with who you are so that you can make a difference? So because of that, I get to interview people about all sorts of topics, because it turns out that stewardship, time, talent, and treasures pretty much covers everything we do, and then I also do solo episodes on there. So I kind of, over the years, I've done different things. Currently, I'm releasing a single solo episode and a single interview each week. But at one time, I was actually podcasting 6 days a week. I had 2 interviews, 4 solo episodes every single week. I did that for over a year. So I've actually got over 1,700 episodes. So there's lots of material out there covering a wide range of topics. And I encourage people to kind of pick and choose. This is not necessarily a podcast that you need to listen to every single episode, but I tried to give clear titles that, hey, this one we're working on time. If time is your area, I've got a playlist around time. If money's the area, I've got a playlist around money.
Yeah, nice. So what made you start podcasting?
See, earlier discussion about writing. So I actually started it in 2018 because at that time everyone was either doing blogs or doing podcasts. Video wasn't yet the big thing that it is now. And I'm like, writing a blog sounds like torture to me. So, but talking, yeah, I can do that. So I decided to start the podcast. I committed to doing it for 6 months. It was going to be an experiment. I was going to wait 6 months and see whether I enjoyed it or not, whether I was getting traction from it. How was it working? I keep telling people I haven't figured out the answer to that question yet, so I'm still doing it. Eventually I'll figure out whether I like it or not. But I really enjoy it. It's a way of networking. It's a way of connecting with people. It's a way of learning. It's a way of processing your own ideas. That's really what I was after with it. And I could do that through writing or I could do that through speaking. I'd rather speak. So it became the podcast.
Nice. So you're a certified disc coach. Can you tell our audience what it is and what you scored on it?
Sure. So I'm a DC, and that'll make more sense in a minute. So DISC is a way of looking at how people are wired around the areas of communication and personality. I like to think of it as a communication tool, and it's one I can carry in my head. It's simple enough that I can actually use it. When you think about some of the other personality programs that are out there, they're complex, they're hard. Myers-Briggs, I can't remember all of the letters for Myers-Briggs. There's just too many of them. It's not that it's a bad test. It's that I can't use it in real time when I'm talking to somebody. Or with DISC, I can use it real time. So basic concept is Marston said that there's kind of two components, and people kind of tend to be more one than the other in each of these two areas. So the first component, DISC, think of this as an up and down y-axis, the old coordinate graphs that you draw. Think of this as the up and down axis. At the top is outgoing, at the bottom is reserved. So what does that mean? Usually people hear outgoing and reserved and they think extrovert and introvert. It technically does not mean extroverted and introverted. Instead, outgoing and reserved, think of those as how your motor runs. So outgoing people, they tend to be high energy. They're the people that get up in the morning and they go until they collapse at night. They're on 24/7. They talk fast, they move fast, they think fast, they make decisions fast. They do everything quickly. Reserved people, on the other hand, are a little calmer. They take a little longer to make decisions. They process things a little slower. They move through life a little calmer. That's a reserved person. So would you agree that some people are more outgoing and others are more reserved?
Yes.
Right? For you, could you consider yourself more outgoing or more reserved?
I'm more outgoing.
Okay, so generally you would be at the top of the graph on that line.
Yes, and when we're done, I'll tell you what I scored.
The left right, okay, is going to be on the left-hand side is task-oriented. On the other side is people-oriented. Again, let me define the terms, right? Task-oriented people, when you give them something to do, they tend to think about what needs to get done. What are the steps? What are the processes? What are the results? How is this going to work? What is it that needs to happen? Where a people-oriented person generally starts thinking about the people first. Who do we need to involve in the team? What kind of impact is this going to have on people? How are people going to feel about it? What's going to be fun about it? They tend to think about the people impacts and how do the energy and how the task affects the people. It's not that one of these is good and the other is bad. They're just different ways of thinking about getting things done. So for you, would you consider yourself more task or more people?
I'm task.
Okay, so you would be in the upper left-hand quadrant, which is a high D. Okay, these are all blends. However, most people don't usually have just one letter. They usually have at least two, sometimes even three, that will score what we call above the line. Simply means it's easier for him to behave in that way. So D are the dominant type. They're high drivers. They're get it done. There's about 10% of the population. They're results oriented. They're constantly thinking about what's next? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? How do I get results? How do I get results? They tend to be high energy. They're kind of the type A personalities. If you've heard the term type A, lead, follow, get out of the way, is a mantra of theirs. That's kind of the D personality type. Do you feel like that accurately describes you, or?
Yeah, that's what I am. I'm a high D.
And you agree with that too,
Yep.
right? So I's are going to be outgoing, and they're going to be people oriented. So I's tend to be the inspirational people. They're about energy and fun. They're the folks that if there's at a conference, and in that conference, somebody says, we need a before they even finish the word volunteer, the I's at least have their hands up, if not, are already heading to the stage. Okay. I've literally been at a conference, but that before the person said volunteer, there was somebody on the stage with them. I'm like, that person is an I. It's like, they're a high I, okay? Because it's like volunteer, boom, up there. They're like moving because they enjoy that energy. They enjoy that fun. They enjoy the spontaneity of things, okay? And that's, again, I's, DI. So DIs are outgoing and people-oriented. Then going down the circle, but I's are 20%, 25% of the population, somewhere in that range. You come down to the S's. Okay, those are going to be reserved, and they're going to be people-oriented folks. These are the nicest people on the planet. These are known as the supporters. They also are they like the status quo. They don't like change. They don't like conflict. They like calmness. They like things to move slowly and be predictable. This is the most common category. Okay, 35% of the population. Sometimes you'll see in some groups as high as 40% are going to be supporters. These are the folks that, with the D, like you, is talking to them and talks loud and fast. They're scared. They think you're yelling at them. You're not, but they feel it as a yell. They also tend to be the folks that have the hardest time with change, but also, if you can help them understand the impact on the team and how you could do this and create fairness and justice and support, and that, they'll also be some of the best people on your team and make things happen. D's often scare them off, so they lose the benefit of those people. And then C is the last category. C's are cautious. They tend to be the rules followers. They tend to be interested in perfection. They want to get things right. So it's not just getting it done, it's getting it done well and with quality that motivates them. They tend to be oftentimes very numbers focused and very process focused. And that's going to be your C's. And again, most people are a blend. So you said a D earlier. What's your secondary characteristic or tertiary?
I'm a high D. I'm just
a high D. Okay.
That's what when they said that there was only 3% of the population was that. I was like, roughly. Yeah, probably about right.
Yeah. It's very few people are purely one of any of the four. And very few people are purely a high D. Probably a good thing that God made the world that way, because otherwise y'all kill each other.
Yeah.
Okay. If 80% of the world was high Ds, we would have killed each other long ago. But it's all of these types are good, by the way. They're not good or bad. Okay. They can all be good leaders. They can all be good salespeople. They can all be good team. A lot of times people immediately start putting people in categories like, the D should be the leader. Not necessarily. Okay. A D out of control is a terrible leader.
Yeah.
They will destroy a team. A D in control that really is aware of who they are and how they're wired, man, they can be great leaders. But that's true of an I, an S, and a C too. They're just going to lead in different ways. Same thing for business owners. People are like, all the entrepreneurs are Ds. No, that's not true. Some of the best entrepreneurs I know are S's or I's. It's not one category does one thing better than the others. Instead, it's almost like by becoming aware of what you are, it lets you lean into your strengths, and it also lets you figure out these are the weaknesses that I better fill these holes and make sure I've got support in those areas.
The one thing I kind of noticed when I looked at them, like, ooh, man, these are my weaknesses.
Yep.
That's what I need to work on.
And they're things, and it's not necessarily that you ever become that your weaknesses become your strengths, but by becoming aware of them, it lets you value the team members or the advice
Yeah.
or the coach or the whatever that you get, your spouse sometimes even, because it turns out opposites attracted disc too. So a lot of times, like I'm a DC, my wife is an IS. It's like we're literally between the two of us, we fill the quadrants, So guess what? I had to learn to talk S, because otherwise I'm talking from my point of view. She's hearing from her point of view. It's like I'm speaking German. She understands French, and this, I can talk louder and slower, but it doesn't help. Instead I had to go, oh, okay, well, I can tell her the same thing I want to tell her, but by translating it into the way she sees the world, she gets the message. When I was a leader in corporate, I did the same thing. Man, I took one of the teams that was one of the lowest performing teams in the company and made them one of the highest performing teams in the company. And everybody's like, how did you do that? I figured out what they needed and what they communicated, and I gave them what they needed.
I mean, I thought that was the best thing with the disc thing, was being able to recognize what other people were, and then like, hey, I got to change the way I communicate with them so they understand me a little bit more and I can lead them.
Exactly. And it's, what's weird is, so like I'm a DC, like I said, I'm a high D and I'm high C. That's my two characteristics that are high. And so what did I have to do to talk S? I turned talking S into a process, because I can follow a process. Okay. I can do steps. I can't do it. It doesn't come naturally to me. So as an example, when I was leading in corporate, I figured out who my S's were. And on Wednesday afternoon, I had a 1 hour block, and each Wednesday, 3 names would pop up automatically. And I got up from my office and I went to those 3 people one at a time. I took my notebook, okay, because I had a notebook where I kept notes. And I literally would walk up and it'd be like, Ryan's turn today. It'd be like, hey, Ryan, I looked over the notes before I got to your cubicle. Hey, Ryan, hey, you mentioned, little Ryan had a baseball game last week. How'd it turn out? How'd they do? Oh, yeah, they won. They're going to state. Awesome. And I'd make notes, going to state, blah, blah, blah. And they knew I was writing this down. They knew that they had a Wednesday that their name popped up. Okay. I didn't hide any of this. I turned it into a process, but I went and visited my S's. Why? Because they needed that personal touch. They needed that visit, and guess what? They performed great, because I gave them what they needed. It sounds, people are like, that's so mechanical. Not for them. They were like, dude, the guy cares about me enough to do this, even though I know this is not easy or natural for him. I love it. By the way, you'll notice I didn't say I visited my eyes.
Yeah. Because they will.
Me.
Yeah. Because like, I had a friend who was an eye, and he would like, I had to stop going over there at certain times because he would have me talking for hours. If I had something else planned, that whole plans would be shot. So it's like, if I have something anywhere near that, it's like, I have to stay away from him because he will drag out a conversation.
So I told my eyes, I taught them, if my door is open, you are allowed to come in and we can talk. Okay. If my door is closed, unless it's an emergency, and let me define what an emergency is, and I literally define an emergency, you don't even knock. Okay. Just come back later when my door is open. You know what? They would come, they respected that. They understood that concept, right? And they got it. And they would come in when my door was open and we'd chat. And they got real good at, if I told them, okay, great. I need to move on and get some other things. Great. Off they'd go. They enjoyed that. They were fine. But I also found ways to engage them in other things with the team. So organizing birthday parties and keeping track of whose birthday and stuff. I didn't do that. I appointed the eye. And I'm like, dude, this is your job now. Okay. Boom, off they went. And they had a blast, and they made sure everybody, if you wanted to, got recognized on your birthday, you were allowed to opt out. You would never force you to do it. But, all of a sudden we had team building exercises and fun stuff and all of that sort of thing. Again, I gave them parameters. I gave them, rule, this is the box you get to play in, but inside that box, knock yourself out, and they did, and they knocked themselves out, and because I was recognizing the team, what was their strengths, what was their gifting, what were the things that they naturally would do and giving you an opportunity to express those things, they loved it. The D's, hey, Ryan, here's what I need you to get done. Let me know if you have any problems.
Yeah.
That's it. That was the extent of the
let them
conversation.
go. And that's why I tell people, I don't need, just tell me what you want done and let me go do it and leave me alone.
And if there were particular rules or parameters or anything, I'd let you know what those were. So you knew that, but otherwise, very little information, very little detail. Knock yourself out. Let me know if you need help and get out of the way. The C's. Okay, let me lay out the process for you. Let me explain to you the ramifications. Here's all of the things. What questions do you have? They'd have some. Okay, by the way, no matter how good you laid out the process, the C still got some questions. Okay, great. Tell me this. We get all those questions out. Go knock yourself out. Guess what? They'd get it done, and they'd get it done right, and it'd be perfect. Okay. Oftentimes the C's check the D's work behind them. But I teamed them up and let them work in a productive way. That was great, So yeah, you learn about it so that you can interact with, communicate with, balance. You don't want a team where everybody thinks the same and looks the same and acts the same and does the same, because you'll have certain strengths, but you'll also have glaring blind spots and
weaknesses. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, I actually put together a landing page just for your listeners. So if you go over to my website, which is inspiredstewardship.com, and then just /through fire. So I took the out just to make it simpler. So just through fire, you'll find a resource page there. It's got a link where you can talk to me if you've got questions or want to learn more about what I do, or think about, hey, maybe coaching's right for you. It's also got some free resources. So for instance, that exercise I gave you earlier, the looking backwards and looking forwards, along with several other ways that you can kind of diagnose where you're having problems in those areas of time, talent, and treasures, and what activities you can do. It's got a link for my book, my podcast, all of that. You can find that at inspiredstewardship.com /through fire.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
I think the biggest thing the biggest things that we needed to, we've covered. I just want to remind people, and I'll reinforce this in a minute too, are that leaning into that and recognizing that no matter where you're at, you could be different. There's hope for it. There's change that's allowed, and it doesn't have to be bad. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be terrifying.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Final question. What is one piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with about overcoming adversity?
It's a process, not an event. Recognize that no matter where you're at, no matter what you're doing, that change is a process, not an event. We always want to look for the quick fix, the rapid change. I talked about earlier going into the gym, January. That's kind of how most of us are wired. We want that instant gratification, and recognizing that that's not what fixes your life. That's not what changes your habits. That's not what makes you different. Instead, lean into what's that one small action that I can take, and take that action consistently and let it build up over time. And you'd be surprised at the change that you can make and the shifts that you can make in just a few months, if not a year. So it's a process, not an event.
Awesome advice. Scott, I can't thank you enough for coming on here today and sharing your knowledge with us. Like I said, it's always great to have another Maxwell guy come on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Not a problem. Well, guys, that's going to be all the time we have here today. Remember, the only way to get what you want is go through the fire.